So I would like to introduce Melanie Laffin. I would like to welcome Melanie. Thank you so much, Melanie, for your valuable time and participation. We are really grateful that you're here to share your expertise with us. We would love to know more about your experience and professional background, Melanie. Over to you.
Oh, yes, great. Well, thank you very much for having me. I am so excited to talk about my passion, artificial intelligence and robotics. So my background is I'm currently a senior developer at Capgemini. What I do is we work in the robotics process automation realm. And what RPA, or robotics process automation, does is essentially automate tasks that a human does on the computer. So it's not cool like big machines or anything like that. It's actually pretty boring looking, and a lot of times we have to slow down our robots for our customers to see what it is exactly that we're doing. But in addition to that, my job in particular is to add in elements of artificial intelligence like chatbots, like machine learning, advanced data analytics, wherever appropriate to our clients' problems as a solution.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Melanie, for giving your lovely introduction. So, Melanie, I would like to ask you, could you please tell your views about what is artificial intelligence?
Of course. So this is a very broad definition of artificial intelligence. I've seen lots of different ones. I like to think of artificial intelligence as a computational system. So obviously not a natural system like, you or I, that exhibits some sort of intelligence. And of course, well, that's putting the two words artificial and intelligence together. But what I specifically mean is the computer will perceive something about its environment and then react to that perception. So that's about as broad as I can go to include all aspects of artificial intelligence. But it's definitely something I urge you all to look up and read about different philosophies on what artificial intelligence actually is.
Thank you so much, Melanie. So what does your role as intelligence automation developer entail?
Sure. So it's pretty fun, actually. So I work as a consultant. I work in Columbia, South Carolina, in the United States. And what we do is we get a client problem. So for example, say that we have a client that has been doing some work manually, and what they do is really boring, really repetitive, and also is usually prone to mistakes. However, if we automate it with a robot, a form of intelligence, it does perceive its surroundings, it does perceive the environment, and it does react to it. So with this robot, we start off by automating these tasks. However, traditional robotics has limitations in that robots do exactly what they're told. So, for example, what I specialize in is something like building a chatbot to get requirements from different people in order to tell the robot what to do. Another thing that I often do at work is build machine learning models and run them for prediction and/or classification. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay, and we're back.
Yeah, great. So, Melanie, what do you think? Is AI the future?
Oh, absolutely. But it's worth noting that we've actually had several time periods that AI has been considered quote unquote the future. So people in AI like to call these AI winters. A lot of the theory and basic discoveries of AI actually came around in as early as the 1950s when computers were starting to be utilized more in business. Unfortunately, from the amount of computing power and that is necessary in order to run AI models, it hasn't really been computationally or financially feasible to run AI models like things like machine learning and chatbots, just because of how computationally intensive they are, and as a result, how expensive that becomes. However, due to platforms like AWS and Azure, and even just how cheap personal computers have become, it's become much more feasible. So I hope to see, we're catching up with everything we know about AI right now in implementation, and I just hope to see AI blow up even more in the future. So it's absolutely the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can you share three differences between machine learning and AI?
Sure. So the first difference is that artificial intelligence, or AI, is really just kind of the broad category and machine learning is a subcategory of AI. So it's kind of like the square and the rectangle. A square is a type of rectangle, but a rectangle is not a type of square. It's a similar thing with machine learning and AI. More specifically, machine learning deals with three different machine learning is more or less trying to only solve a very specific question or a very specific type of problem in artificial intelligence. Namely, can we do some sort of prediction, or can we do some sort of classification? Finally, the major difference I would say that has to do with machine learning versus AI is that machine learning often is defined as the computer being able to do something without explicitly programmed to do so. Whereas with AI, you can still build AI systems that are explicitly programmed.
Great, wonderful. So how can someone break into artificial intelligence and robotics jobs?
Yeah,
Means someone who is not from this field. So how can that person break into artificial intelligence and robotics jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty good about answering this question because originally I was a mathematician. I was not even in AI or robotics or anything. So I guess I'll start with the story of how I got into this field, and then I'll give you a more broad sense of how someone can break into it and certain jobs that we need that are not straight developer jobs. So to start off with, as mentioned, I was a mathematician. I was working on my PhD in mathematics. I was writing papers. I was teaching mathematics. And I had realized that I didn't really want to pursue mathematics as a career. So I joined a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers as a project manager, actually. And they quickly realized that I was a very technical person, and they threw me on something called RPA, which I had no idea what those letters even stood for. And that's really how I got involved. Was I just happened to be a technical person who liked programming, and I was in a company that recognized that. To that end, I would like to say that there's lots of jobs that are in artificial intelligence, much like there are lots of jobs in IT that aren't direct programming. Of course, there is, don't want to take that away from people who want to program. Of course, there is the programming jobs that you're welcome to do that you'd expect. But we also have the need for people who are architects. So the people who are not getting down and dirty with the code, but can architect or come up with a solution to an AI problem. That requires a deep understanding of AI as well. So, however, if you're totally not in this field, if you're in a field like business or something like this, you can also definitely come in as a project manager. We need people who can write requirements and understand what clients need, or just in general what an AI project needs. So it's definitely, I think, the first step is to have an interest and to state that interest. As mentioned earlier, AI is the future. So the more you're interested and the more you show that interest and you try to pursue, you will find a role, because it's going to be such a big deal in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, what do you think are the top three skills needed for an intelligence automation developer job?
Sure. So the first thing that I look for when I'm trying to hire people on my team is I look for people who are process oriented. So again, because we are automating jobs, not just coming up with a systems implementation, I need to make sure that we have developers and business analysts who understand that there are sequential steps that need to be replicated by the computer. So I think as abstract as it sounds, understanding how a process works is the first step. Next, you obviously have to understand basics of computer science. Fortunately, working in intelligent automation, you don't have to have a deep understanding of algorithms and runtime and things like that. But you do have to understand basic things like loops, data, data types, storing data, and how to retrieve data in order to make a good functional bot. Finally, the last skill I would say you need is a very close, the ability to read very closely to details. Because again, since you're automating something, you need to be able to replicate that almost perfectly. So if you aren't the type to pay attention to details, this is not the job for you.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for the lovely answer. So, what education or background or experience is needed to get started in robotics field?
You know, I always think that if you have, of course, if you have enough passion, you can get by and you can learn. However, again, when we are hiring, we are looking for people who do come from certain backgrounds. For our business analysts, we are looking for people who do have business degrees, which is pretty straightforward. But we also look for people who have computer science degrees, information technology degrees, masters in information technology, information systems as well, because they understand how information systems work and interact and touch each other. I would like to say that the majority of the team that I work on is actually math and statistics majors as well. So I think that that's one major that people don't sometimes overlook, whereas we do have a technical ability and we do have you know, an understanding of process and logic. So that's another background. However, again, you know, you can have, if you have the desire to get into the field, I think it's never too late to learn.
Wonderful. So, Melanie, what is the interview format of artificial intelligence role, as in number of interview rounds or in terms of behavioral, technical, how many?
Sure. I have seen it in terms of 3 or 4 rounds, depending on whether originally you technically start with a recruiter screen for the most part. The recruiter kind of determines whether you'd be a good fit with your skill set and your personality. And then you tend to talk to anywhere from 3 to 4 people in the company. So these can be, you know, managing directors, project managers. Typically you talk to a more senior developer on your that will be on your future team. And one thing I've also noticed is people tend to talk to vice presidents as well, people who kind of run the group that you're working in. One thing I would like to mention is that my company, if you're straight out of college, does do an additional round where you actually are brought in for a case study. So you're brought in and you're given a situation, and then you do a role-playing exercise where you talk about the case and you basically pretend to be the consultant.
Great. Thank you so much. So, what are the 5 common questions asked in an interview for artificial intelligence role?
Sure. So I will say the first thing, especially as you start to climb the ladder, is to talk about your experience. Talk about the projects that you've done, the problems that you've solved. So I've had interviews where that's been almost the only question, is that, you know, walk me through your resume, tell me about the projects that you've done. And, you know, because I have more experience, that takes more time. So obviously, if you're right out of school, maybe your experience is only with schoolwork. So one thing that I like to ask people is, what is your favorite class and why? Talk to me about what you're interested in. Another good question that I like to ask is, you know, talk to me about, like, walk me through something that interests you in artificial intelligence so I can get an idea, because it is such a broad field. For example, since I do intelligent automation, are you more interested in the machine learning, artificial intelligence aspect, or are you more interested in the robotics aspect? Then another question I like to ask is questions related to leadership and self-direction. because as a result, you are going to be at some point, not everyone's going to hold your hand the whole time. You're going to be expected to work on your own and deliver results. So I usually ask people to tell me a time that they've been a leader. And then finally, another question that I ask, and this is probably a little bit more with consulting, but I ask about a time that someone has had some sort of conflict. The reason for that is often in our requirements, we have that our clients tell us everything they know at the time, but they almost always leave something out. And that can sometimes lead to a bit of conflict between the client team and ourselves because they think that they told it to us before and then not necessarily. So I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with putting someone in front of a client and knowing that they will be treated respectfully. So a mix of technical and also a small bit of skills.
Great. Fantastic. So what are the 3 best resources to prepare for AI position interview?
Do you want to know what? I always just Google things and pick up. So Google, obviously, consulting the Oracle never hurts anything. There's also a subreddit called CS Career. And I believe there's another one called r/CS Career Questions. And those are ones that kind of help you prepare for interviews. And finally, I just need to say I use Top Coder to prepare for interviews. This is a more general, if you're into development, this is a more general way to solve problems. And it prepares you to think through not only algorithms and implementation, but testing edge cases as well. So Google things, of course, Reddit, and also Top Coder are my top 3 ways that I prepare for an interview.
Great. So apart from this, what are the different career paths for developers in robotics field?
Sure. So what I've noticed is that people tend to kind of go one of 2 routes. So the first route is that they tend to stay technical. So a developer tends to go from being a junior developer to a senior developer to an architect, and then they go up the chain with architects and how big the projects get. So that's if you want to stay technical. However, I've also seen it that someone can go from junior developer to senior developer, then maybe to architect, but sometimes they start going into project management as well. So they go into managing the projects as opposed to coming up with the solution. And then in consulting, there actually is kind of a third path, which is sales. So you go out and you try to get new clients based on the information that you have. And as a developer, you know the best. So kind of different levels depending on where you want your career to go.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for the answer. So what are some challenges and opportunity you faced in AI and robotics field?
Oh, yes, there's lots of challenges, unfortunately. So let's start with the bad and end with the good. So the challenges I find right away especially relate to RPA or robotics, is that the RPA softwares that we work with are wonderful and they're getting better all the time, but sometimes they're not very stable. So with RPA softwares, they are written in a way that not as technical people can get up and running and come up with a bot very quickly. However, they're not the most stable. So for example, if you run an automation where you're clicking through a website, if that website changes, it's very likely that your bot will break and you'd have to go back in and recode certain parts. So that's definitely a big challenge we have as far as keeping bots functional as time goes on. A challenge that we have in AI is that while it's a huge buzzword and everyone loves it, the problem with a lot of things with AI is it's an emerging technology where our clients are not always comfortable with the level of unknowns that we may have just because the field is emerging. So for example, when we deliver a machine learning model, you give a result with a certain accuracy. That accuracy is not 100%. So if you're doing something like, say, image detection or object detection in an image, you'll say, well, I think that this is a cat in this image with a 75% likelihood. 75% is not really great, especially if you consider in robotics, it's 100%. You get the result 100% of the time, or something is broken. Whereas AI is just kind of like, well, sometimes that is what you get because that's as good as the technology is. So those are some challenges. Now, the opportunity, I think, is actually fixing those two things. As the technology grows and it's no longer emergent, AI is going to, the accuracy is going to just go through the roof. And I think there's a huge opportunity and a huge push in the community to get better. Everyone wants to beat the benchmark. Likewise, in robotics, this is obviously a big issue where if the website changes or something changes, the bot breaks. We want the bots to become more stable. So just fixing the challenges alone are huge opportunities. And then, of course, being an emerging technology, there's something new every day. There's something new every day, and you can always chase out and understand and learn and grow. You're not staying stagnant in these fields whatsoever. So that's some great challenges, unfortunately, and opportunities that they come up with.
Fantastic, Melanie. So here is my last question for you. What advice do you have for aspiring developers to be successful in AI and robotics?
I think the most important thing is passion. Make sure that if you love this, you will do well. It's hard, and sometimes, like I mentioned, you're not going to get the most accurate results, but if you just keep working, you will get through this, and you can be here like me talking about your career in AI. So, it's something I love. It's something I love to share with other people. And I think that if you're an aspiring developer, keep that passion alive by looking up. There's lots of articles. You can look up almost any technology website, even in business nowadays, you can't go anywhere with hearing about some part of AI. So just stay on top of the news, hear about all the cool things that are going on. And then also, one little piece of advice in addition to that is treat yourself to tech conferences, because you get to hear about all sorts of, the coolest things is hearing what people are doing with the technology. So for example, as much as you want to do, you like the theory and stuff like that, it's always so cool to hear what other people are doing with these technologies. So my advice would be to stick with it and, keep learning and have that passion and always keep track of what other people are doing.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for your